The Skyline Terrace Restaurant gleamed with afternoon sunlight streaming through its floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the city from the top floor of Metropolitan Medical Center. Mom had chosen this exclusive venue for her 52nd birthday lunch, reserving the private dining section that was typically used for hospital board meetings and major donor events. I sat quietly at the elegantly appointed table, positioned perfectly to observe both the intimate family gathering and the stunning vista of the medical complex sprawling 30 floors below us. The restaurant's sophisticated atmosphere, with its pristine white linens and fresh orchid centerpieces, created the perfect backdrop for the kind of celebration that successful people expected when marking important milestones. Mom commanded attention at the center of our reserved alcove, absolutely radiant in her champagne silk dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. At 52, Elena Martinez still possessed the kind of polished beauty that required significant investment to maintain, and today, surrounded by her family and closest friends, she was glowing with the satisfaction that comes from a life carefully orchestrated for maximum social impact. 52 years, she said, raising her crystal flute of Dom Perignon, and I can honestly say that every single one has been dedicated to building something meaningful. This family, our reputation, and our standing in this community. My stepfather Robert beamed at her from across the table, distinguished in his custom-tailored navy suit that complemented his successful surgeon's bearing. At 56, Dr. Robert Martinez commanded respect as one of the region's most accomplished plastic surgeons, his practice serving celebrities and wealthy socialites from 3 states. My older half-brother Diego dominated the conversation from Mom's right side, his voice carrying the confidence that comes from being groomed as the heir to a medical dynasty. At 29, he had just completed his surgical residency and was being recruited by the most prestigious hospitals on the East Coast. His success was evident in everything from his Rolex Submariner to the way other young physicians sought his mentorship. The reconstructive surgery program at Johns Hopkins is incredible, Diego was saying, adjusting his platinum cufflinks with practiced casualness. They're offering me a fellowship that would put me on track to become one of the youngest department heads in the country. Sometimes I look at what we've accomplished as a family and realize that the Martinez name is becoming synonymous with surgical excellence. His wife Isabella nodded enthusiastically, elegant in her designer dress that showcased the lifestyle that a successful surgeon's salary and family connections could provide. It's such an honor to be part of a family with such a distinguished medical legacy. Diego is going to continue that tradition for generations to come. I continued eating my perfectly prepared seared salmon, letting their familiar conversation about surgical procedures and medical achievements wash over me like expensive background music. They had no idea that the simple navy dress I was wearing had been custom designed by the same fashion house that dressed Nobel Prize winners, or that the understated gold watch on my wrist was worth more than Diego's annual residency salary. Speaking of family legacy and maintaining our reputation, Mom's voice took on the authoritative tone she used when making important social pronouncements. I think this birthday celebration is the perfect time to address some family matters that have been concerning Robert and me. The conversation around our table quieted as Mom's commanding voice drew attention from our group of 8 family members and close friends. Her words carried the weight of someone who had spent decades building social connections and who expected her children to honor that tradition of excellence and achievement. When Robert and I married 15 years ago, Mom continued, her tone taking on the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to addressing charity committees and hospital auxiliaries, we made a commitment not just to each other, but to building something that our children could be proud of, something that would establish the Martinez family name as a symbol of medical excellence and community leadership. Robert nodded approvingly, his pride in their shared achievements evident in his expression. Their success was well known in medical and social circles, 2 accomplished people who had built complementary careers while accumulating the kind of wealth and influence that enabled significant philanthropy. Looking at Diego, Mom went on, her voice carrying clearly across our private dining section, I see that commitment being honored and expanded. He's not just following in Robert's footsteps, he's innovating, pushing boundaries and preparing to take the Martinez medical legacy to heights we never imagined possible. Diego straightened in his chair, clearly basking in the public acknowledgement of his achievements. Isabella squeezed his hand, her expression radiating the satisfaction that comes from being married to the family's acknowledged golden child and future patriarch. Then Mom's gaze found me across the table, and I felt the familiar weight of her disappointment settling over the celebration like an expensive but suffocating cloud. "And then there's Sophia," she said, her tone shifting subtly but unmistakably, the warmth draining from her voice like champagne from a cracked glass. "My biological daughter, who at 27 continues to embarrass this family with her complete refusal to pursue any meaningful medical career or contribute to our distinguished reputation." The words hung in the sophisticated air like the scent of the restaurant's expensive floral arrangements, overwhelming, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. I could feel the attention of everyone at our table focusing on me with the intensity of surgical lights, probably wondering why this celebration of family success was taking such a pointed turn toward disappointment and judgment. "Sophia graduated from Harvard Medical School with highest honors," Mom continued, her voice carrying the frustration that comes from watching potential go unfulfilled. "But she refuses to pursue a surgical residency, refuses to join any established practice, and insists on working in what she calls community medicine, with people who will never contribute anything meaningful to society." Robert leaned forward, assuming his role as the family's medical authority and practical advisor. "We've offered her every opportunity: residency positions at the most prestigious hospitals in the country, partnerships in established practices, introductions to department heads who could fast-track her career. But she refuses to take advantage of connections that other medical school graduates would sacrifice everything to have. Instead," Diego chimed in, his voice carrying the condescending tone that successful older siblings perfect through years of being the favored child, "she insists on working in free clinics and community health centers, essentially throwing away a Harvard education to treat people who can't even afford proper medical care." Isabella nodded sympathetically, though I caught the flash of satisfaction in her expression. "It's so difficult when family members refuse to live up to their potential. Some people just don't have the ambition for real achievement." I could feel the attention of nearby tables in the restaurant, other diners probably wondering why our family celebration was becoming increasingly public and uncomfortable. Mom stood up slightly, apparently deciding that this was the perfect moment to make her disappointment a centerpiece of the afternoon's entertainment. "You don't belong with successful people," she declared, her voice carrying across the restaurant with the authority that made her one of the city's most influential society matrons. The words cut through the elegant atmosphere like a scalpel through skin, sharp and designed to cause maximum damage. I could see the shock and sympathy on the faces of Mom's friends, the way they looked at me with the kind of pity usually reserved for charity cases. "Look around this restaurant," Mom continued, gesturing toward the sophisticated dining room filled with hospital administrators, successful physicians, and wealthy donors. "Everyone here has dedicated their lives to building something meaningful, something that serves society and creates lasting value. You're wasting your education and your family connections on people who will never amount to anything." Robert nodded gravely, his expression mixing paternal authority with what he probably thought was tough love. "Community medicine is fine as a hobby or a charitable interest, but it's not a real career for someone with your advantages and education." That's when something caught Mom's eye. She had been gesturing toward the restaurant's windows while making her point about my lack of achievement, and her gaze happened to fall upon the large bronze plaque mounted on the wall directly behind my chair. The plaque was elegant and substantial, impossible to miss once you noticed it, with raised lettering that caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. "Martinez Pediatric Wing," she read aloud, her voice suddenly uncertain, "donated by Dr. Sofia Martinez." The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear the soft clinking of silverware from other tables, the distant hum of the hospital's air circulation system, the barely audible sound of elevators moving between floors far below us. Mom's face went pale as the implications began to sink in. Robert's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. Diego's mouth fell open mid-chew. Isabella's eyes darted between me and the plaque as if trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. That's your name," Mom whispered, her voice barely audible even in the sudden quiet of our dining section. I set down my fork and looked up at the plaque that I saw every day when I came to work but had somehow forgotten would be visible from our table. "Yes, it is. But that would mean—" Robert started, then trailed off as the full significance of what he was seeing became clear. "It means I donated $52 million to build the pediatric wing of this hospital," I said calmly, my voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. Along with funding for the Community Health Center Network, the free clinic system and the medical school scholarship program. The number hung in the air like a revelation. $52 million. More money than most of the people in this restaurant would see in their lifetimes, and I had given it away to create exactly the kind of community medicine programs that Mom had been dismissing as worthless. $52 million? Diego repeated, his voice cracking slightly on the words. That was just the initial donation 3 years ago, I clarified, pulling out my phone and showing them the foundation website that detailed our ongoing philanthropic work. The Martinez Foundation for Community Medicine has donated over $130 million to healthcare initiatives serving underserved populations. Isabella was staring at my phone screen, her earlier condescension completely evaporated. $130 million? How do you have that kind of money? I developed a revolutionary cancer treatment during my final year of medical school, I explained, addressing the entire table since everyone was clearly listening anyway. Instead of pursuing a traditional residency, I licensed the treatment to pharmaceutical companies and used the proceeds to fund community health initiatives. Mom found her voice, though it came out rough with disbelief. You developed a cancer treatment? A targeted therapy for pediatric leukemia that increases survival rates from 67% to 94%, I confirmed. The licensing agreements generate about $40 million annually, which goes directly into the foundation. Robert leaned forward, his medical training allowing him to understand the significance of what I was describing. 94% survival rates in pediatric leukemia? That's revolutionary. That would save thousands of children's lives. It already has, I replied, showing them the foundation's impact reports on my tablet. We've treated over 8,000 children in the past 3 years, and we're expanding the program to include adult cancers and rare genetic disorders. The conversations throughout the restaurant had resumed, but I noticed several hospital staff members glancing over with obvious respect. Dr. Williams from the oncology department raised his glass in a subtle salute. The hospital's chief of staff nodded approvingly from across the dining room. The community medicine work you've been dismissing, I continued, includes mobile medical units that provide care to homeless populations, free cancer screenings in low-income neighborhoods, and a telemedicine program that connects rural communities with specialists they could never otherwise afford to see. Mom was reading the foundation website on my phone, her expression cycling through shock, confusion, and something that might have been the beginning of understanding. You're treating cancer patients who can't afford care? I'm treating everyone who needs care, I corrected gently. The foundation operates on the principle that access to healthcare shouldn't depend on ability to pay. We've eliminated medical debt for over 40,000 families in the past 3 years. Diego was studying the plaque on the wall with new eyes. The Martinez Pediatric Wing. That's where I did my pediatric rotation last year. It's one of the most advanced children's cancer treatment facilities in the country. State-of-the-art, I confirmed. We designed it specifically to provide the same level of care to uninsured children that wealthy families receive at private hospitals. Every treatment room has the latest technology, and we maintain a full staff of specialists who volunteer their time. That's when Dr. Patterson, the hospital's chief executive, approached our table. He was a distinguished man in his 60s who commanded respect throughout the medical community, and his presence immediately drew attention from everyone in the restaurant. Dr. Martinez, he said, walking directly to me with obvious deference, I wanted to personally thank you for the additional funding approval for the rural medicine program. The mobile units you're providing will serve communities that haven't had access to specialists in decades. The title hung in the air like an announcement. Dr. Martinez. Not the disappointment, not the failure, not the daughter who didn't belong with successful people. Dr. Sofia Martinez, one of the most significant medical philanthropists in the state. Thank you, Dr. Patterson, I replied, standing to shake his hand. I'm excited to see the program expand into the mountain communities. Access to prenatal care alone will save dozens of lives annually. Dr. Patterson beamed with professional pride. The board voted unanimously to name you Philanthropist of the Year. Your foundation's work is literally transforming healthcare delivery for underserved populations. As he walked away, the silence at our table was deafening. I could see other diners recognizing me and whispering among themselves, probably sharing stories about the foundation's work or their own experiences with our programs. Mom reached across the table and took my hand, her eyes bright with tears. Sophia, I'm so sorry. We had no idea what you'd accomplished. I know you didn't, I replied, squeezing her hand. And I forgive you. But I hope you'll understand why I chose to focus on saving lives rather than building social status. Robert cleared his throat, his voice rough with emotion. $52 million for the pediatric wing. That's more than our practice generates in 5 years. The foundation's work isn't about the money, I said honestly. It's about the 8-year-old girl who beat leukemia because she had access to treatment, or the grandmother who caught her diabetes early because of our mobile screening program, or the teenager who didn't die in a car accident because our rural clinic had the equipment to stabilize her until she could reach a trauma center. Diego leaned forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that looked like genuine respect and curiosity. Sophia, would you consider letting me volunteer with the foundation? Because what you've built is exactly the kind of meaningful medicine I've been wanting to be part of. Of course, I said, pulling out my business card. Though you should know that foundation work requires a significant time commitment and doesn't pay nearly as well as private practice. Diego took the card with obvious relief. I think I've been measuring success by the wrong standards. As the lunch continued and my family processed the revelation that their supposed disappointment was actually one of the region's most accomplished physicians and philanthropists, the conversation shifted from judgment and criticism to curiosity and respect. Mom asked detailed questions about the cancer treatment I'd developed. Robert wanted to understand how the foundation's mobile units operated. Diego expressed genuine interest in incorporating community medicine into his career plans. But the moment that mattered most came when Mom stood up to make a toast. Sophia, she said, her voice carrying across our private dining section, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you admiration, respect, and recognition for choosing to use your gifts in service of people who needed them most. She raised her glass toward me, her expression carrying both pride and humility. You didn't just become a successful doctor. You became a healer who chose compassion over prestige. That's not just medical achievement, that's moral excellence. The applause from nearby tables was spontaneous and genuine, and as I stood to acknowledge it, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong about your potential. Sometimes it's showing them that success and service can transform both the people you help and the people who love you. The next morning, Diego called to ask about volunteer opportunities with the foundation's mobile clinics. Mom and Robert offered to host a fundraising event for the rural medicine program.